think I literally heard AOC say this recently, that no one achieves substantial wealth without somehow or another victimizing other people.
But here's the truth. You're not going to get health care to these people by threatening to tax and eat the rich. You raise billionaires' taxes, they just leave the state. Or they leave the country. Or in some cases, the planet.
Joe Rogan is firing back hard at AOC's narrative that the super rich built their empires on stolen ground. According to the podcasting juggernaut, politicians like AOC and Sanders have essentially turned against the American dream, that intoxicating promise that anyone can rise to extraordinary wealth. Rogan's dismantling was sharp, brutal, and deliciously feisty. So smash that subscribe button because this conversation is absolutely electric.
Businessman, although I kind of am.
You are.
I kind of am in some weird way. I've become a businessman.
Yeah.
But this idea that it's easy to become a billionaire and that these billionaires somehow or another are the problem because they're not paying their fair share is so weird that's a narrative that actually gets pushed through when you look at the actual numbers of the tax base and how much they contribute and how many jobs they provide. And yeah, they make more money than everybody else. Right. You could do that too. It's like, this is one of the things that America is really good at. You can come from nothing and become incredibly wealthy if you figure something out and go. And we just assume that everybody who makes an incredible amount of money stole it.
Joe Rogan pushes back hard on the notion that every extraordinarily wealthy person clawed their way to the top through theft or deception. It's a seductive but deeply flawed narrative, and one that has become a cornerstone of progressive politics, championed loudly by figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Zoran Mamdani, and Bernie Sanders. This worldview doesn't stop at questioning how the wealthy earned their fortunes. It extends to the persistent claim that the rich systematically dodge their fair share of taxes, exploiting loopholes while ordinary Americans foot the bill. It's a compelling story. The problem is the data tells a very different one. The top 1% of earners in the United States contribute nearly 40% of all federal income tax revenue, a figure rarely mentioned in progressive talking points, yet one that fundamentally complicates the narrative they're selling.
The only, like, this is a narrative that gets pushed along democratic socialists, that no one achieves that. I think I literally heard AOC say this recently, that no one achieves substantial wealth without somehow or another victimizing other people.
Yeah. And then Jeff Bezos is the obvious counterexample, which is like every time you do the one click and the thing gets delivered to you 2 hours later at the cheapest possible price, saving you and your family a lot of time and money.
But at the expense of small mom and pop stores, allegedly.
Although a lot of them sell on Amazon, a lot of small businesses sell on Amazon.
The truth is simple. America rewards innovation and hard work. When you build something that genuinely improves people's lives, whether it's a product, a service, or an idea, the market has a way of recognizing that value and compensating you accordingly. This is a foundational principle of free market capitalism, and one that democratic socialists consistently seem to misunderstand or deliberately ignore. Take Jeff Bezos. Progressive critics love to cast him as a villain who gutted Main Street, steamrolling small businesses and Amazon's relentless march toward dominance. But that framing conveniently ignores a far more compelling truth. Amazon didn't just displace small retailers, it handed them a lifeline. Through Amazon's marketplace, small business owners gained access to a global customer base they could never have reached independently, crossing state lines and even national borders with nothing more than a laptop and a product worth selling. That's not exploitation. That's the democratization of commerce.
thing you can do is you can compare and contrast to other countries that have more draconian policies in the direction that those folks are suggesting. And so Europe in particular, many European countries have a much more draconian, are much even more hostile to business. And the result is they're much poorer. Their slower growth are actually shrinking. The people there are much less well off. There's much less funding for social programs. And so you can also do the cross-country comparison.
Joe Rogan's guest makes a point that economic history consistently validates. Countries that impose suffocating regulations and punishing taxes on businesses don't prosper. They stagnate. Across the globe, nations that treat entrepreneurs as adversaries rather than engines of growth find themselves in a slow, painful economic decline. Look at parts of Europe. When governments claim the majority of what a business earns through aggressive taxation, they don't just reduce profits, they eliminate the incentive to build in the first place. Why pour years of your life, savings, and energy into a venture only to surrender the lion's share to the state? The result is predictable. Fewer startups, fewer jobs, and a shrinking middle class propped up by unsustainable government spending. Capital and talent migrate toward freedom, and the countries that understand this simple truth are the ones that continue to thrive. Maher shared similar sentiments to Joe Rogan when he said this.
To the government, if you add in state tax, local sales, property, fees, Obamacare, probably almost 60% of what I earn. That's a lot. And I still wouldn't mind if Bernie Sanders would stop saying the rich don't pay taxes. And while I'm sure the super rich with their army of accountants and corporate loopholes get away with, us regular rich people pay a of taxes. And who stands up and gives us a pat on the back? Nobody, that's who.
Bill Maher adds compelling weight to Rogan's argument, offering a first-hand account that cuts straight through the progressive talking points championed by Sanders and AOC. As a wealthy American himself, Maher speaks from direct experience rather than theory, and what he reveals is striking. Nearly 60% of his earnings go to taxes, not a modest contribution. Not a carefully engineered dodge. More than half of everything he makes flows back to the government. Yet the dominant narrative on the left would have the public believe the wealthy are barely paying anything at all. Maher's candid admission lends powerful credibility to a truth that progressive politicians consistently obscure. The rich don't just pay their fair share. By virtually every objective measure, they pay disproportionately more than anyone else. When one of Hollywood's most prominent liberals is publicly undermining your tax argument, it might be time to revisit the talking points.
10% pay 72% of all federal income taxes, and the bottom half, 3%. The Democratic Socialists talk about socialism like we don't already have a lot. Social Security, unemployment, Medicare, nutritional assistance, Medicaid, Obamacare, disability, housing subsidies. Again, not against it. Just the same question. How can you be soaking the rich and failing the poor so badly?
The top 10% pay 72% of all federal income taxes, and the bottom half pay 3%. The Democratic Socialists talk about socialism like we don't already have a lot. Social Security, unemployment, Medicare, nutritional assistance, Medicaid, Obamacare, disability, housing subsidies. Again, not against it, just the same question. How can you be soaking the rich and failing the poor so badly? Maher raises a question that strikes at the very heart of the progressive tax argument. If the wealthy aren't paying enough, what exactly has happened to the enormous sums already collected? It's a fair and frankly devastating question. The rich pay their taxes. The money flows into government coffers in staggering amounts. But somewhere between collection and delivery, something goes wrong. Take the Affordable Care Act. Obamacare was sold to the American public as a solution to healthcare inequality, a promise that the poor would finally have access to quality medical coverage.
Yet for millions, that promise remains frustratingly out of reach. The pattern repeats itself across nearly every major social program. Money gets allocated, bureaucracies expand, and the people these initiatives were designed to help see little meaningful change in their lives. Before demanding more from the wealthy, perhaps the more honest question is, what are you doing with what you already have?
Happiness, but it sure can buy healthiness. Half the country can buy access to concierge doctors, specialists, new treatments, personal trainers, nutritionists, private chefs, and whatever Gwyneth Paltrow is putting in her And the other half has the place I was just talking about, remote area medical, the pop-up healthcare clinic that rolls into town once a year like a county fair, except instead of riding the tilt-a-whirl, a volunteer doctor pulls your infected tooth. And the saddest thing in the 60 Minutes piece is that nothing has changed since they covered it in 2008.
The state of American healthcare tells a story that no amount of political spin can obscure. For many citizens, access to basic medical care has become so financially out of reach that they find themselves waiting, literally waiting, for a traveling NGO or charity clinic to roll into town once a year. That is not a healthcare system. That is a failure dressed up in bureaucratic language. Then there's California, the progressive movement's crown jewel and its most damning indictment. The state collects taxes at a rate that would make most nations blush. It promises transformation, equity, and world-class public services. Yet its most ambitious infrastructure projects sit frozen, hemorrhaging funds without delivering results. Homelessness is rampant. Middle-class families are fleeing. Costs keep rising. If California represents the fullest expression of progressive governance and action, it raises a question worth sitting with. What exactly are all those taxes actually building?
Truth, you're not going to get health care to these people by threatening to tax and eat the rich. You raise billionaires' taxes, they just leave the state. Or they leave the country. Or in some cases, the planet.
Maher delivers what may be the most decisive blow of the entire conversation. The progressive dream of heavily taxing billionaires doesn't just fail on principle, it fails in practice, and the evidence is already playing out in real time. New York and California serve as cautionary tales. As tax burdens climbed, wealthy residents didn't simply accept the bill. They left. They took their capital, their investments, and the jobs they create with them, relocating to Florida, Texas, and beyond. The tax base these states were counting on quietly walked out the door. This is precisely why voices like Maher's matter. He's not a conservative ideologue. He's a liberal, sounding an alarm about the very real economic consequences of policies championed by AOC and Mamdani. When the wealthy leave, it isn't just the government that loses revenue. Working people lose opportunities, businesses, and livelihoods. Ideology untethered from consequences isn't compassion. It's reckless.
But he had a good idea recently that might be apropos here. During the recent government shutdown, he volunteered to pay all the TSA workers himself, with couch money. That's how super rich our super rich are. They can single-handedly fund entire government programs. Okay, so let's make that a thing. The Adopt a Cause challenge for billionaires.
Maher drives the point home with characteristic humor, but beneath the comedy lies an uncomfortable truth that democratic socialists appear remarkably unwilling to confront. Taxing the wealthy out of the country doesn't just shrink the government's revenue stream. It eliminates something far harder to replace: the voluntary contributions the rich make outside of Washington's reach entirely. Billionaires and high-net-worth individuals fund hospitals, universities, research initiatives, and charitable programs at a scale no government mandate can easily reproduce. When they leave, that generosity leaves with them. And ordinary Americans are watching. They see the empty promises. They see the rising costs, the stalled projects, the fleeing businesses. They see the gap between what progressive politicians campaign on and what they actually deliver. This is precisely why Democrats face a genuinely dangerous road heading into 2028. When voters begin
Connecting these dots, and increasingly they are, the political consequences could be both swift and severe.
The middleman, the government, and the healthcare bureaucracies that, for whatever reason, no matter how much they take in, never seem to get enough to the people and just shame the billionaires into doing it directly because they have all the money and noblesse oblige isn't just the name of a cologne.
What this conversation between Joe Rogan, Bill Maher, and their guests ultimately reveals is a fundamental clash between progressive ideology and economic reality. The left's narrative that the wealthy are villains who steal, dodge taxes, and hoard resources at society's expense simply doesn't survive contact with the facts. The rich pay disproportionately more in taxes. Entrepreneurs like Bezos expanded opportunity rather than destroying it. Countries and states that punish success with punishing taxes don't build utopias, they build an exodus. And the billions already collected by governments like California's have delivered broken promises and stalled ambitions. America was built on a simple but powerful covenant. Innovate, work hard, create value, and you will be rewarded. Democratic socialists want to dismantle that covenant in the name of fairness, without ever honestly accounting for where the money
Already goes. If 2028 arrives and voters remember this conversation, the progressive movement may find that the most expensive thing they ever did was refuse to deal in truth. And on this note, we draw the curtains on today's video. If you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this.